Okay, sorry about that. Got to this slide and my computer literally froze to the point where I had to restart it. So I apologize if I closed abruptly. We were talking about puberty, purely looking at the physical development of adolescence. Now let's look at some other things. I mean, part of that is the brain development. I mean, we're seeing, again, another rapid development of the brain, especially in the areas of the cerebral cortex, more specifically the frontal lobes. At this point, it is still very immature in its development in terms of like the frontal lobes, that part of our brain that really, is where our personality comes from. It's what makes us who we are as individuals. And so there's a reason why teens and adolescents kind of make bad choices sometimes, or they don't, they're smart, but sometimes they do dumb things. And it's because, again, their brains are literally developing still. And this is something that goes on far beyond just your teen years. Your brain development, especially in the frontal lobes, is continuing until your 20s, about 25, 26. So we typically think of puberty as ending around 18, but that's not always the case. Puberty, at least from the brain's perspective, goes on for quite a while. And this sort of development of the brain allows for the development of Piaget's final stage, formal operations. And at this stage, the idea is that we have reached the final stage of our cognitive development, and we can now think not only logically, mathematically. We can think about things in the past and present. We have use of language. We're past all of those things that we kind of pitfall. Oops, sorry about that. Sort of some of the pitfalls we've experienced in earlier stages, and we can now engage in sort of hypothetical deductive reasoning. We can think of abstract. We can think about things that are separate from the here and now, and that is the final stage according to Piaget. Just because, though, you reach a certain age or you go through puberty does not mean you reach the stage. According to Piaget, we have to kind of be stimulated cognitively. We have to be kind of spurned, on through our interactions with other people, through learning, through our experiences to grow and reach the stage. It's not like we turn 18 and, oh, there we go, we reached Piaget's formal stage. Or as soon as you start growing, hair on your chin if you're a male, oh, I'm in Piaget's formal operation stage. It's not quite how it works. Okay, so some other things associated with cognitive development with teenagers and adolescents. Egocentric thought seems to return. There's this idea of that teenagers and adolescents, they kind of have this thought that everything is only happening to them, and nobody else is going to understands what's going on or understands what they're going through. But in fact, most people do, because we've all gone through adolescence. There's also this belief of like an imaginary audience, that people are watching them or worried about them or concerned about things that are going on when they're really not. And again, there's also this idea of, why teens do dumb things. They also feel kind of invulnerable at this age. They kind of feel, sometimes you hear it referred to as a personal fable. Other times you hear it as Superman syndrome. But basically teens kind of think they're indestructible because they're so young and virile at the time. They've got nothing but youth on their side. Okay, truth or fiction, it is normal for male adolescents to think of themselves as action heroes and act as though they are made of steel. Pause the video. What do you think? Welcome back. The answer is, in fact, true. It is that Superman syndrome, or that personal fable that teens like to tell themselves, that, hey, I'm 17 and young, or 18 and I got the whole world by the toe, so to speak, so nothing can hurt me. And a lot of times that's true, but you hear about some really sad or bad event, examples of that not being true. So, be a little humble if you are still a young male adolescent, I should say. The emergence of the formal operations in terms of our thinking also gives rise to what Kohlberg calls the last stage of moral reasoning, which is post-conventional. And again, this is starting to think about things that are very abstract in terms of like rights and values and universal laws and things like that, that really, we can start thinking about things like just versus unjust laws. Prior stages, we would only think about laws in terms of how they maintain societal functioning. Now we can actually start to think about, okay, yeah, society maintains functioning based on this law, but is it really a good law? We can really start to dig deep. And according to Kohlberg and Piaget, not everybody reaches this kind of moral thinking. Not everybody thinks this way. We kind of have to find inconsistencies in the way we think morally in order to grow and think deeper about things and kind of move into this post-conventional level of thinking. During adolescence, this is the time where things begin to switch. Children begin to spend much less time with their parents and spend much more time with their peers. Peers start to become much more influential at this point of the game. Although it's kind of maybe overemphasized how much parents and teenagers don't get along. In fact, for the most part, there's still a lot of love and loyalty and respect there, but just maybe not as much time spent together. And we're now seeing at this stage, if we look back at Erikson, we can see this is the stage where children go into now adolescents, they're going into the stage called ego identity versus role diffusion. And basically, this is trying to figure out their identity. Who am I as a person? This is right around the time that, teens start to, maybe they're in high school still and thinking about their future, or maybe they're in college and they're starting to think about what they want to do afterwards, and really thinking, okay, do I know who I am as a person? Do I know what I want to do with my life or my future or whatever? Versus, I really don't know who I am. I don't know what I want to do. And I'm kind of in this state of diffusion. Speaking of adolescence and adulthood, there is now sort of this emergence of a new sort of developmental stage called emerging adulthood. You're kind of still in those, roughly we see it between 18 and 25, but that's just an approximation. This is where you're seeing people who are adults by age who still may live at home. They may engage in college and other things to kind of better themselves for the future. But again, they're not fully immersed in kind of the adult lifehood. Maybe they're not living on their own, or maybe they're not working while they go to school, but they're foregoing some of the traditional adult responsibilities that we would normally expect somebody 18 to 25, or maybe what our parents' generation might expect somebody 18 to 25 to do. And so where does this come from? And some people call this, it's millennial. Some people use the term millennials derogatory, sort of, in a derogatory way. But it really comes from, we have much more time, ability to explore our identity and to focus on ourselves. It's just a whole new way of seeing the world, I think. And, I think it's mostly for the better. I guess I am a millennial, so I'm only speaking from my perspective, but, we just have new luxuries afforded to us, I think, and it allows for more self-exploration. Now we're getting into adulthood, and adulthood is broken down into a few different stages: early, middle, and late. Early adulthood is kind of where you reach the peak of your physical development, about to your 30s or so. But obviously, depending on how you diet and take care of your body, will really elongate that peak or shorten it, depending on if you're not taking care of yourself well. Middle adulthood is where you start to see decline. Women undergo menopause. This is the point where menstruation ceases, and the ability to give birth to children is no longer available. By adulthood, you really start to see the body is really starting to break down. It's starting to slow down in terms of cognitive response times, the bones, the skin, everything is really kind of showing its age. And again, you can hold back the hands of time by taking care of yourself in your early adulthood and your middle adulthood. The more you take care of yourself here, the better you're setting yourself up here. So, and it's all about change. I mean, early adulthood, we're in our prime. By late adulthood, everything is kind of changed. Our hair is graying or thinning out. Sometimes we're going bald. Our brain is literally changing physically. It's shrinking. It's not working the same way. We're just not as sharp as we once were between the ears, and our ears themselves are not as sharp, and our ability to, all of our senses are kind of slower than they once were. We see the development of wrinkles, but this is all about change. All about change. We are, think of life as a roller coaster. At one point, we're going up, 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 and then after a certain point, we got to go down. And again, depending on how you take care of yourself will determine, is that a very sharp decline, like a fast decline, or is it just a really slow, gradual decline? Okay, some other things we see. It's the body is just, it's harder to take care of itself. Hormone levels are dropping. Our ability to fight off illnesses decreases as we get older. Our lungs aren't the same. Really, all I'm telling you is that it's just things kind of get worse for the body. But again, with proper diet and exercise, a lot of this stuff can be minimized. So I'm not going to read over all this stuff. You can read about it yourself. But just know that, it's a lot of change as we age. A lot of change. Cognitive development, we can see creativity throughout our lifetime. That's not something that kind of diminishes throughout the lifetime. We can see maybe how we express our creativity changes, but creativity itself, for the most part, doesn't change. Different types of memory functions will decline with age. Crystallized intelligence is just your ability to remember just like facts and information. And for the most part, that's not going to change too much with age. But however, your fluid intelligence, your ability, the processing speed will change. It will slow down as you age. Some other things that could impact aging, of course, like Alzheimer's disease, which is a disease that leads to deterioration of the brain. And obviously, people, it's something that affects our elderly population. There are case study examples of people that are younger, 40s and 50s, who develop Alzheimer's, but it primarily affects the elderly. More likely than not, you probably know somebody who's been affected by Alzheimer's disease. I lost an uncle to it, so it's a pretty awful thing to see somebody go through. They lose really their sense of identity if the disease progresses rapidly enough. They don't know who they are or where they are or who anybody else is. It's really sad. It's not normal necessarily, but we are seeing it more as our population ages. We're getting older. Okay, quick comprehension check. Sorry. Of the following activities, the one that uses crystallized intelligence is A, reciting facts about the Civil War, B, using a math formula to solve a problem, C, solving a jigsaw puzzle, D, visualizing the way an object would look if rotated. Pause the video. What do you think? Okay, welcome back. The correct answer is A, and the reason why it's A is crystallized intelligence is just memory of like facts and information. So if we're trying to recite something and think about something from the Civil War, we're using crystallized intelligence versus solving a jigsaw puzzle or a math problem or rotating objects mentally is a form of fluid intelligence. Okay, truth or fiction? Alzheimer's disease is a normal part of aging. Pause the video. What do you think? Okay, welcome back. The answer is fiction. It is becoming a bigger problem. We're seeing more cases, but it is not a normal part of the aging process. There are plenty of people who age very well and successfully who do not develop Alzheimer's disease. Okay, really how people deal with adulthood and how they transition through adulthood obviously is determined by, different cultural expectations. In certain cultures, you're expected to marry by a certain age, have children by a certain age, but now we're seeing, in American culture, especially with millennials, that is changing. And we see, looking at Erikson again, we look at, the next stage. We're in stage 6, which is intimacy versus isolation. During adulthood or early adulthood, this is the time when you've kind of figured out who you are if everything went well in the previous stage, and now at this point you are trying to find either companionship or isolation. Romantic companionship is typically what we're referring to. Do you find a spouse, a loved one, significant other, start a family perhaps if that's your cultural obligation or prerogative, or living in isolation, not having those bonds with others. That's kind of that fork in the road that Erikson's talking about. Middle adulthood is generativity versus stagnation. Basically, we're getting old. Are we doing things that we think are worthwhile? That are with our remaining time, we can kind of see we're on the back nine, so to speak, of the course, and we can kind of see the end maybe a little bit, knowing that maybe I only have 20, 30 years left. So what can I do that's really meaningful and worthwhile? And this is sometimes where people might undergo midlife crises. My kids have left the home, empty nest syndrome, and I don't know what to do, so I'm going to go get a new car, or I'm going to buy a new house. This is kind of where you see some of those events take place. This is also where you see the development of the sandwich generation, where you have adults who are taking care of their parents, and they might also have children who are still living at home. So they're kind of, again, they're in the middle of this kind of the sandwich. Truth or fiction? Most parents suffer from the empty nest syndrome when their youngest children leaves home. Pause the video. What do you think? Welcome back. It is in fact fiction. Most parents don't. That is, it's not totally uncommon, but a lot of parents, for the most part, can adjust well. But that's not, uncommon to see. Parents kind of worry, okay, what do I do now? I'm no longer a parent in the sense that I've got to take care of this other person day in and day out. Now I've got to figure out what to do with my life. Late adulthood, ego, integrity versus despair, the last stage of Erikson's developmental. This is where basically we're looking back on our life, and can we look back at it positively and say, okay, I did good things with my life. I helped other people. I took care of myself and loved my loved ones. Or do we look back with despair? Do I have regrets? Do I have things that I wish I would have done or things I wish I would have said? Okay, let's see. Last comp check, I think. All of the following are examples of generativity, except A, teaching the English language to recent U.S. immigrants. B, successfully investing one's earnings and enjoying a satisfying retirement. C, volunteering at a homeless shelter. D, acting as a scout leader. Pause the video. What do you think? Okay, welcome back. You should have chose B, except, this is a meaningful activity, obviously, spending your money, but all these other ones are, how am I doing something meaningful by maybe helping others? Generativity is kind of giving back to others. I've taken care of myself. Now I want to do something meaningful, maybe to help other people out. Okay, so that's chapter 9. Again, sorry for the weird pause in the video. Sorry about that. But anyways, we're done with chapter 9. We'll move on to chapter 10 on the next video, which I believe will be covering personality theory. So I'll see you around the bend on chapter 10. Take care.